Hello. Hey. Good to see you guys. Hope you are well. Hello. Blessings to you. Good morning. Thank you for inviting your followers. We are going to be talking about marriage today. People love that topic. So, in line with the prophetic, we're going to talk about merging your ministries, which is really important. Do you have teachings anywhere else besides Periscope? All my teachings are on YouTube, and you can also purchase a lot of my teachings on my site, AskDrFaith.com. Okay? So we've been talking about the prophetic ministry, preparing for the class that's starting Thursday night. But one of the things that I've really realized is that oftentimes a lot of people that are prophetic marry people who are not, and they have, different kinds of issues that comes along with that. So I wanted, I wanted to talk a little bit about understanding each other's mandates in marriage and how to merge them. So that's really important. So that's what we're going to hit on today. Because a lot of times you'll have people that both love the Lord, but their mandates are different, and they just feel like there's no way that they can merge them. There's no way that they can meet halfway. So if you're married, if you want to be married, share this with your friends, and we'll get started with that topic. One of the most important things to realize is that God has wired each of us to be different. And so what's the webinar going to focus on? The webinar on Thursday night is on developing your prophetic gift, understanding the office of a prophet, understanding the gift of prophecy. So you can get all that information at AskDrFaith.com. All right. So it's really important. It's really important. Thank you, guys. You have all these makeup comments. I have lipstick on. Thanks. Okay. It's really important. The first thing, when you get married, that you understand that your expression to God is not necessarily going to be the same way that your husband or your wife is wired to connect to the Father. So the biggest issue that I see starting from the beginning is that you may have somebody who loves to pray and loves to intercede, but their spouse may not necessarily love to pray or love to intercede. You may have someone who really loves the Word, loves digging deep in the Word, and the other person would rather, maybe just be in a worship service. So you need to have it clear in your head that just because the Lord wired you one way does not mean that your husband has to be wired the same way, or your wife has to be wired the same way. You need to be able to understand how God has wired your spouse so that you could encourage them in their expression with the Lord. My husband loves to pray, but he's not necessarily going to be doing 6 a.m. prayer calls like I have a mandate to do, but he prays over our family. We pray together. It just looks a little bit different. Whereas he really loves the Word. He can study the Word for hours and hours. And I study the Word as well, but I connect to the presence of God easier through worship. And so it was really important early on for us to understand, and for me to understand, that just because I do all these certain things, my husband does not need to do that. Does this mean unequally yoked? No, I did a whole Periscope in February on my book. I have a book on marriage. It's called a Marriage Preparation Guidebook. You can get it on my site or Amazon, and I go over 22 ways to know that you're equally yoked. Equally yoked, when you think of a puzzle pieces are not the same. The reason the puzzles fit together is because they're two different pieces that fit in closer together. And so when we're equally yoked, one of the things that, or when you're looking to see if you're equally yoked, is that person pushes you towards God. That person encourages your development. That person does certain things with you in the Lord. But just because you have a different expression or understanding of worship, worship, and I'm not talking about understanding. You don't want to be with somebody who, for example, you believe in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, all that stuff, and they don't necessarily believe in it. It's going to be very hard for you. If they're open and they're willing to grow, fine. But if they're like, no, I think that's the demonic, I think that that's the devil, then, it's going to be really hard for you. Now in September, I'll do the relationship series again, because we have our marriage preparation boot camp then, and my wife camp course that I offer. So today I just wanted to touch on this because specifically prophetic people, and we've been talking about prophetic people, oftentimes the Lord will put you with non-prophetic people, and he does that so that they can be balanced in your life. And so if you are a dreamer and you're a seer and you're having all these revelations and all that stuff, your husband or spouse may not necessarily be that, because God needs to create balance. So your wife or husband may be someone who's more logic, someone who's more word-based, because they want you, the Lord wants you to be able to have that healthy balance. What the word does for prophetic people is it helps us ground us. If you do not have any grounding in the word or biblically, it's gonna throw you off. And so, a lot of us feel like, oh, because I'm apostolic or prophetic or whatever, then I need to marry a woman or a man who's the same way. But I tell couples this all the time. When the Lord brings you somebody, and let me paraphrase this, it's always going to be a choice. God can bring you 3-4 different guys, but if you don't make the choice, you could miss out on somebody who's really, really great. God is not going to make you marry anybody. You make that choice when you marry them, and you take responsibility for that marriage, for the development of that marriage, and for the growth of that marriage. But what the Lord does is he allows us to have different strengths so that we can help accomplish the fullness of the kingdom. And most men are usually very wired to be apostolic. That doesn't mean they're apostles. When we say apostolic, we mean that there's a makeup in men to pioneer, to build, and to create. That's what men are wired to do. Women are usually more intuitive or more prophetic. That doesn't mean you're a prophetess, but what that means is that you are more, you sense the spirit more, you kind of just know stuff, you're more of dreamers, and the Lord brings us together so that we can help bring that balance. Because prophetic people, they can dream all day long, have visions all day long, and then not move forward. Now, I have some couples who the woman is more apostolic, like they're go-getters, they're builders, they're like, let's do this, and the man is more prophetic, and he, has been dreaming for 6 years and has not done anything. So you need to figure out who you are in that marriage so that you can begin to learn that, hey, we need to create a balance. There are things that my husband does really, really well, and there are things that I do really, really well. I always tell people that you should marry somebody who's going to make you better. And marrying somebody who makes you better doesn't mean you're marrying somebody who you're going to get along with all the time. You're going to marry somebody who's going to challenge you, who's going to push you, who's going to get on your nerves. And that does not mean that it's not God. Part of becoming more holy or becoming more like God, the Lord uses our spouses to help sharpen us. So the areas that we feel like you need to do this and you need to do that, or the issue could be that the Lord is trying to teach you patience and the Lord wants to teach you discipline. And so instead of just looking at their issues, you need to begin to ask the Lord, what is it that you want me to learn from this? What is it that you want me to benefit from? And so it's really important. It can be a challenge. It can be, but you have to make certain resolutions when you get married. Things like divorce is not an option. We're always going to talk through things, even if it takes several days. When I do the marriage stuff in September, I'm going to give you guys some clues of some things that you need to do before you get married, and then if you're already married. But you have to have resolutions from the beginning, all right? So the first thing is you need to understand that you both interact with God differently. But just because you're different does not mean that you guys are not compatible or you cannot work together to build something. Secondly, you need to be able to encourage each other in your assignments and even in your differences. So even though I may pray more, my husband may read the word more, what I need to do is say, okay, babe, I'm going to start sitting with you and we're going to start studying the word together. And he's going to say, okay, I'm going to align with you and we're going to start, praying more together. Whatever it is, you guys need to meet halfway. Okay. Now, when we come to the practical thing in terms of the assignment, there are some people that are called into the fivefold. The fivefold is the pastor, prophet, evangelist, preacher, teacher, and their spouse is not. That does not mean you're unequally yoked and your ministry is going to fail. What you need to figure out is, what is your spouse called to? Your spouse may be called to business. Your spouse may be a lawyer. Your spouse may be entertainment. Your spouse may be, a teacher. What you need to do is, you guys have to have a meeting point. You have to have a meeting point. When my husband and I were courting, we talked about our 5-year vision plan. And this is something I talk about a lot when I teach on the dating stuff. But when we were talking about our 5-year vision plan, we had different visions in certain places, but then we also had places where we met and we realized, okay, my husband was in the sciences at that point. I'm in more of the soft sciences, which is psychology. My husband's called to business on a big scale. I'm called to business more on an individual, social scale. And so we were figuring out, okay, where do we meet? We're both called to government. I'm more of an advisor. He's more of an administrator when it comes to governmental stuff. And so we realized, okay, these are the places that we meet. We may not always be up on stage together, tag teaming, even though next week when we teach our church on generosity, we're going to preach together and tag team. But, there might be some seasons where he's off in Asia building his business and I'm over here, taking care of the children or taking care of the ministry. But that does not mean that we're not building something together. When we talk about building or merging mandates, it has to be beyond just church. You guys need to have a vision for your family, a vision for your finances, a vision for where you're going. What if couples go to different churches? I'm not a big fan of that, but there's always a lot of reasons why that happens. And so I'll need to know the background of why that's happening. But it just depends on the agreement. Two people can go to different churches, but at home they can still be cultivating their walk with the Lord together, have a common vision for their family and their children, and be building together. But it always helps when you both are under similar words, or at least if you're both cultivating your growth together in your house, okay? So your mandate in terms of your calling doesn't have to be the same. Just because I'm apostolic prophetic doesn't necessarily mean that my husband had to be apostolic prophetic. My husband's more of an apostolic pastoral heart. And so this is really working really well for us because we're both go-getters, we're both builders, but he's more gentle, he's more patient. I'm like, you know what, get it together, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, babe, take it easy on them, give them a little time to figure it out. And so we balance each other out. So with everything that you do when you're looking at a spouse, you need to make sure you find, where do we meet? Where are the points that we're the same? And then where are the points that we're different? And not so much focus on what is different, but focus on how you can go together. Your mandated calling is, okay. So what is a prophetic teacher? Most teachers can be teachers that just gather information from the word and then teach based off of that. People that are prophetic teachers usually have revelation and insight, could be from visions, dreams, or information like that. They connect it to the word and bring insight. Now, the revelation doesn't always have to come from an outside source, but a lot of times, yes, I'm a prophetic teacher. A lot of times you will get people that are prophetic teachers can get a scripture and break down the revelation in a way that people have never seen it before. A clue that you're a teacher is that you can take complex information and explain it and anybody can get it. What if you can't get your spouse to be consistent, both naturally and spiritually? You need to sign up for a marriage counseling session with me. There's probably a lot of other things that are going on there that is making it hard for that to be consistent. Now, you can't get your spouse to do anything, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that women make. We feel like maybe we can tell them to do this or that. The thing that I tell couples in general, if you're trying to get a result from your spouse that you're not getting, model the behavior that you want to see. Begin to model what you want to see out of your spouse. And so if your spouse doesn't do anything romantic for you, you begin to do some things romantically for him or her. If your spouse doesn't pray well, you invite them to pray with you. So begin to model the behavior that you want to see in your spouse. Okay? Okay, Beaver Change, you want to say? Yes. All right. So once you have realized where you guys merge together, the other thing that's really important is you need to understand the season that your spouse is in. Both of you guys are not always going to be in the same season. Now, there should be some major things that you have agreed that you're going to build together for the Lord with. But if there's a season when one spouse is in school and you want to build your ministry, you can't be getting mad at your spouse who can't help you because you are building your ministry. He has to or she has to focus on school, right? So you need to figure out what season are we both in? Are we both working together to make sure that we, one, achieve our individual goals, and two, begin to work together? I've done a lot of periscopes. You can check them out on my YouTube about red flags. Someone is asking, what if your spouse is unforgiving? Well, that's a red flag. And I'm sure they did not become unforgiving after you got married. They were probably unforgiving before you got married. So that, you can go back and watch those periscopes, and I'll touch on it again in the spring. But discerning what season you're in, you cannot push your spouse to doing something that they maybe don't have the time, they don't have the resources, or they don't have the teaching for. But that's why it's important every year for you and your spouse to put together a vision for your marriage and for your family and where you're going in that year. So you can figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to do. My husband just finished grad school, so he worked and I worked a lot. Now my husband is working. I don't have to work as hard. We understand the different seasons that we were in. There was no complaining or arguing over it because we understand the seasons that we're in. And so it's really, really important. And that usually is a big issue too when it comes to merging your mandates, because one feels, well, my husband doesn't pray, or my wife, doesn't want to help me with my business. But it could be that they're just in a different season, and you need to figure out when you're merging those seasons. And it is important for a marriage to be walking together. This is why people end up with divorce and they say we have irreconcilable differences. It's because your spouse changed, but you didn't realize they were changing, and you weren't able to connect with them and understand where they were going as they were changing. Don't take it for granted that your spouse is always going to be the same in every season. You need to realize that your spouses change, and if you are not attentive to them changing, you're going to begin to go in different directions. And so it's not that the issue that people cannot change when they get married. The issue is that you don't change together. It's when people begin to change. One takes up a hobby, the other one doesn't notice. One cuts their hair, the other one doesn't notice. You begin to go in different ways. So it's really, really important that you stay focused in that area. I have my pastors who both of them preach really, really well, but they're in different seasons. And so the wife is not preaching as much. She may be taking care of the children at home. I know she's also developing her own business, but that doesn't take away from her and who she is. And this is really important too for both spouses to understand the season of promotion in your spouse. Both of you guys may not get promoted spiritually, quote unquote, at the same time. You may have a season, if both of you are in ministry, where one, the Lord is opening doors, the Lord is sending out to minister, the Lord is growing the ministry, but the person who that's happening to needs to make sure that they are affirming their spouse, and the spouse needs to be confident enough to know that they can support them and undergird them. And I want to talk to the men. This is really, really important, especially when you have apostolic wives or prophetic wives, that your identity is strong, because you cannot be going back and forth because your prophetic wife or apostolic wife is getting more attention, or the Lord is building a platform for her. One of the things that I used to pray, because most men would say, oh, I can't marry you because you're so prophetic and you're a doctor and you're all this. And they used to be very intimidated. And the first thing my husband said to me when he found out what I did was, oh, I bet a lot of men are intimidated by you, but I'm not going to be. And I knew then that, okay, this is a man who is confident. My husband is confident. Like, you're not going to waver him. He was like, I don't care if you're a prophetess to the nations. You need a wife. You're still a woman. And so he knew that there was a need for a husband. It doesn't matter how eloquent I am, how strong I am. There is a need to have a husband that is supportive. But some of you guys married men that were insecure, men that were hoping to, use you to help build their platform. And now that God is beginning to release you and God is beginning to throw you out there, they're intimidated and they're trying to control you and they're not celebrating you and they don't want to release you. They don't want to push you forward. It's really, really important that at the beginning you have an understanding of the strength of your husband. And someone just said they have a strong personality. My husband has a strong personality and so do I. But a strong personality does not equal being boisterous. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you have to be loud. You always have to get your way. You always have to, have the last word. Strength is not based on how much you talk. Strength is based on your ability to use wisdom. It's a ability to use self-control. And so some people, and this is not going at the person who shared this, but I really need to share this, especially for women. Well, I'm strong and and she's saying her husband is strong too. Good. And you do not know how to be soft and you're wondering why you're still single. Men are not looking for a woman who can necessarily outshine him or, trump over them. Sometimes you need to back yourself down, allow them to carry your groceries, allow them to help you because it's a helpmate. Some of you guys have been so independent, quote unquote, that you're upset that you're still single. But when somebody wants to come in and help you and come alongside you, you're not allowing them to do that. Most of you guys, that's connected to a father wound. You learned false independence and all this stuff. But men, they want to come alongside you and help you. And I know there's some men on here and they'll cheer at that. It's really, really important. But there are godly men who will see what's on your assignment and be able to push you forward in it. But you need to allow men to lead. That's the other thing. Women will say, oh, my husband doesn't know how to lead. But the truth is you don't know how to let him lead. I have a blog on this on my site, 10 ways to let your husband lead. You need to give him permission. Instead of telling him what to do, ask him what you should do. Instead of always being the one who comes up with the agenda, ask him what the agenda is. And this goes back to understanding that both of you guys are wired differently. Men are wired differently. They do not like a lot of talk. They're not going to be there and talk about everything and break everything down. If you're wired that way, that's fine. But if they say, you know what, I'm going to do this, allow them to do it. Don't go back to them an hour later. I thought you said you were going to do it. 2 hours later, I thought you were going to do it. Let them flow and be who they are. This is so important, even in their leadership style. Even if you feel like they're slower than you or faster than you or whatever, allow them to be who they are and meet them where they're at. It's so important when you're learning how to merge your mandates, when you're learning how to understand that. And so for the folks that are just jumping on, one of the things that I said earlier, when you understand your vision, where you're going 5 years from now, 10 years from now, set clear goals. Okay? Some of you guys feel like, oh, I've been called to preach, and so I got to start a church right now. And your husband or your wife may say, no, this is going to happen in 2 years or in 3 years. Just because they don't feel like it should be done right now does not mean that they're not hearing from the Lord. They could actually have the wisdom of the Lord. And this is really important for prophetic people. And we're going to talk a lot about this on the class Thursday night, because I'm going to teach you guys on some of the issues that prophets and prophetic people have. We get ideas and visions and dreams and we want to run with them right away. But usually what God does is he'll put you with a mate that takes a little bit of time to make decisions, that likes to think through things, because he wants you to use wisdom. You don't want to just be running and starting this and running and starting that. So just because you hear from the Lord more clearly, I don't want you to overlook your other spouse that may not necessarily be as prophetic, quote unquote. Being prophetic does not mean that you're more spiritual. It just means that God communicates to you differently than he does with your spouse. And so you need to be able to allow God to speak to them the way that he does. And not only that, but take their advice into account. A lot of us feel like, and the world and church world has kind of made it like this because we feel like, oh, that the prophetic gift is out in front. It's one of manifestation. So we celebrate it more. But I love my husband's wisdom. I love my husband's depth. There are certain things that my husband just knows. He may not have had a dream or, whatever, but he just knows. And I have to be able to say, you know what? Even though I have the whole prophetic blueprint, this man, God has given him wisdom. So I need to just wait. I need to, be able to listen to what he's saying and then go from there. So I'll take a couple of questions before, what I don't want to be holier than that. Okay, yeah. I'll take a couple of questions on marriage, on the prophetic and the apostolic, and merging your mandates before I jump off. I think I had seen a couple that scrolled past that I wasn't able to answer. So I've given you guys some good tips. The ones that missed it, just go watch the replay, and you can catch it on YouTube as well. So much with okay, thank you. Yeah. But it's really, really important to celebrate one another, celebrate each other's uniqueness, celebrate how you're wired to connect with God, because the kingdom is not one that everybody is the same. And, when we are in a marriage, we're both the same, then there's not a need for the other person. And so it's really, really important that you understand the uniqueness. My husband has a prophetic calling, but is suffering from combat-related issues. Make sure that he gets deliverance. Make sure that he gets counseling. Moving from it's hard because we love the people. Okay, I missed that question. You have to put it back. What if you let your spouse flow, but they don't let you? Well, you need to reach a balance. You need to be able to talk. Can you explain being one flesh, but yet have different mandate and callings? All right. You need to be able to talk through these things. You need to be able to say, babe, in these examples, I let you do XYZ. When I asked to do XYZ, we weren't able to do it. Now, if you can't even communicate with your spouse on that level, then there are other issues that are going on besides just the flow issue. All right. Being one flesh. This is really important. Being one flesh does not mean having the same mandate. We all have the same mandate. Bill Johnson said it so clearly. He said the mandate of every believer is to raise the dead, cleanse the leper, and heal the sick. And so if you're trying to decide, should I marry this person? You need to say, okay, can I raise the dead, cleanse the leper, heal the sick, cast out demons with this person? If the answer is yes, then you have the same mandate. My husband and I have the same mandate. It's to enlarge the kingdom of God. Now, that could be through business. That could be through arts and entertainment. That could be through teaching. So you need to have the same consensus that whatever we do with our lives, we're going to enlarge the kingdom of God. That's the big mandate. After that, then you figure out the expression in which you've been wired to fulfill that call. And some of that might be together, and some of it may be together. Some of you guys may have called to own a boutique, for clothing that, bless women of God. But your husband may not necessarily be into a boutique, but he may want to have like a men's ministry. So your job is to come alongside him and support him in that. And then he can do the booking or the accounting for the boutique. So the same mandate doesn't have to be we're both going to preach at the same time. No, our mandate is that we're called to increase and expand the kingdom of God. And then you go from there. All right. All right. Doesn't want to stay married, but we are called for international ministry. All right. Well, obviously he doesn't think that you're called. The thing about marriage is that it encompasses two wills. God will never trump his agenda over your own personal agenda. That's why he has given us choice and he has given us free will. And I teach a lot on this. We have a 6-week boot camp that I do in September. Registration is going to be up in July on marriage. And one of the things is God is not going to oppose his will. If that person doesn't want to be married, if that person doesn't want to believe the word of the Lord, God may give him prophetic words. People may encourage him, but ultimately it is his choice to stay married and to go forward and fulfill the call of God on your life. We can forfeit the call of God on our lives if we choose not to obey the condition that is connected to it. What is it when every time you're intimate with your spouse, you encounter nightmares? They probably need deliverance. There's probably some demonic stuff that they had that they didn't do. I always encourage couples, go through marriage counseling and go through deliverance together. Okay? Let me see the other questions that I missed. We want to grow, but moving from our church is hard because we love the people. How can we do this? Do you love the people more than you love the mandate that God has put on your life? You cannot have a false allegiance to people, but then be dying spiritually and be dying emotionally. You can stay in touch with those people. Now, if they're telling you if you leave this church, you can't stay in touch with any of the people, then it's already a controlling environment. But you can leave a church and still have the friends. And so you need to value the call of God on your life, the demand that for growth that you need to go, how do you go through deliverance? You need to find a ministry that does deliverance. I'll touch on that in a minute. But you need to find, you and your husband need to go. You need to go where you can grow. That's all there is to that. Do you do prophetic boot camp for single people? It's not a prophetic boot camp. The boot camp that I have in September is called a marriage preparation boot camp. It's for singles, newlyweds, and those that have been married for less than 3 years. Then I do a wife camp, and that's for women that have been married for however long. And then we do a husband huddle, and that's for men, helping them understand wives. So those are all courses that you'll be able to take in the in the fall. So I was reading someone does deliverance on Periscope. All right. There's certain things that you need to be face to face with. I do counseling, I do inner healing, and we have done deliverance where God has come in and he breaks certain things. The Holy Spirit can go anywhere and he can break certain yokes. You can be in your own room and ask the Lord to help deliver you, but there are certain things that you cannot see that people around you can see. And so you need to figure out what area you're in, what churches believe in it. If you want to come July 30th in Raleigh, North Carolina, we're doing I'm having someone coming in who's like a deliverance minister. We're teaching people on deliverance, and then we're going to do a corporate deliverance, and everybody's going to be able to walk through it. We're starting a 6-month course on different aspects of the kingdom. So get where God is. That's all I can say about that. How can we get counseling from you? You need to email info@askdrfaith.com, and then there's different options for counseling and consulting. All right, I can take a couple more questions and then go. I know I missed a couple. But it's important. Deliverance, like I said, you could do it over the phone, but I don't like ministries that start doing stuff like all they do is prophesy over Periscope or prophesy over the phone or there's something weird about that. There's nothing wrong with prophesying here and there but if that's your whole ministry, and then when we try to find you, you don't have a church, you don't have no, something's weird about that. What to do with disagreement in marriage if one can submit to the will of God and the other doesn't? Well, it depends on the disagreement. I mean, I think in marriage you have all kinds of disagreements. But the reason you married each other is because there were some things that you agreed about. So you need to find the things that you agree on. I mean, sometimes people get married when they're unsaved, and then one couple gets saved later, or one person gets saved later. But you still need to learn how to walk with God and still walk with your spouse, because not every unsaved spouse is bad. A lot of times when we think about someone as an unsaved in a marriage, we think that they're mean and they're drinking and they're all that. Sometimes they just haven't come to the Lord yet. And so you need to figure out how to reach that balance. Okay? All right. Conversation. Okay, good. Anybody else? 1 or 2 more questions, then I'll be going. Bless you guys. Learn what God is calling you to. What if you married a backslider who's bounded by lust? Well, if you married a backslider, you already knew what you were getting yourself into, right? Unless he backslid after you guys got married. But there were red flags, and I don't give people an easy way out. What it means is that you need to be praying for him so that he comes out of it. If he's not beating you, he's not cheating on you, he's not neglecting you, you need to figure out how to work that out. And you need to get counseling, and you need to get help as much as you can, and pray that God will bring people around him that can help him get to where he needs to get. All right. If he's bound by lust and you're having sex with him, you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself spiritually, so that there's no transference of some of that stuff that's going on in his psyche and in his spirit. I'm very interested in the marriage boot camp. Looking forward to more details. Awesome. Yeah, it's 6 weeks, and I go at it from a spiritual and psychological perspective. I give you all the tools that you need to have a successful marriage. So we have a lot of people who go through that course. It's all online webinar, and you get my book as part of the training. So that registration will be up in July. Alrighty, bless you guys. If there are no more questions, I'm going to let you guys go. Make sure that you share it with your single friends and your married friends. And then we will go, oh, good, you've been married 22 years. Congratulations. I love it. Tisa put up my book, Journey to the Altar. You can pick that up if you're in that place trying to understand marriage. Okay, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to answer that. All right. Yeah, of course, Rebecca, you're getting married. I'm doing their marriage counseling. We're going to finish it up. My husband and I have been separated for almost 4 years. No contact September 15th. Am I naive? I would have to know your whole story. I'm coming to visit your church. Awesome. Would love to have you. What to expect when you and your husband go into teaching together for the first time? Do you give continuing education credit? It depends on your institution. They may allow me to write a letter for you and be able to do that. So it depends on where you're trying to get the credit for and from. Someone asked about what do you expect when you and your husband are going into teaching the first time. I'm not sure what that means. Do we get a book when we take the upcoming prophetic class? You get a manual and you get material that should be sent out today. Yeah, I don't know what that teaching question meant. So if you could expound it, maybe I can answer it another time. All right. Blessings, guys. Have a great afternoon. And if you haven't registered for the Am I a Prophet Prophet class, make sure that you do. Class starts Thursday night, 2 hours. Dr. Faith, I dreamt I saw you on Primetime TV show. Yay! Awesome. I get those prophetic words all the time. So that's why I'm getting my teeth fixed. So I can be TV ready. Thank you guys for all your encouragement. Talk to you soon. God bless you. Bye.